Okay, so this is my third attempt at recording this video. So if I make mistakes through here, I'm just going to say, whoops, another mistake, instead of re-recording the whole thing. So anyways, we're out again on a Monday morning, February 1st, for an e-learning day due to the inclement weather. Thankfully, today's math was going to be a review of what you learned in third grade about fractions. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this. Should be an easy day, but it'll get us ready to head into fourth grade fractions. So the first thing you need to remember are that fractions name a part of a whole. And you need to remember that. That's very important. Fractions name a part of a whole. So what does that mean? It means its quantity or its value is less than 1. So let's say we're eating that Kit Kat candy bar and there's 4 pieces in that candy bar. You know how it's kind of in 4 long bars? Well, if I break off 1 piece of that candy bar, I have a fraction of the candy bar. I don't have the whole thing. I have a little fraction of it. And so we could name what's left over as a fraction. We could also name how much we have as a fraction. So the piece that I broke off, I have 1 piece out of the 4 on the entire candy bar. And what's left over? Well, there are still 3 pieces out of the 4 total. So if I look at those, no matter which one I'm looking at, which one I ate or how much I have left over, I still don't have the whole candy bar. I just have 1 little piece of it. So let's move on. Something that, and we've talked a lot about this throughout the year, but a numerator, it's the top number. It answers the question. Okay, this is really important to remember. So if I were to go back to that candy bar and how much I ate, if I were to ask you how much did I eat, the question is, how much did I eat? What's the answer to my question? I had 1 piece. Now this fraction bar, this thing right here in the middle, it separates the numerator and a denominator. And I know that got cut off, and I'm sorry about that. But we also know that that is a division symbol. And when we are finding fractions, we are taking parts of something, so we're dividing them up. Hopefully that helps you to remember. Now the denominator, and again that got cut off too, the denominator is how many pieces did you start with. So how many pieces did we start with? We had 4. So the top number is the numerator. It answers the question. The denominator, think of D in denominator is down, is the bottom number, and it tells you how many pieces you have in all. Okay, let's move on. So if I'm looking at, the question is, write the fraction of the part that is shaded. So how much of the candy bar do we have? Well, the numerator, 1, is how many pieces we have. How many were there total? 4. How many pieces of cake do we have? Well, 1, 2, 3 out of how many possible? 4. So my numerator for this first one is 1, and my denominator for the first one would be 4. For the second one, my numerator is 3, my denominator is 4. If you notice, both of those denominators are the same, and both of these fraction bars have the same amount, 4. But the question was, number 1, how much candy bar do we have? We had 1. How much cake did we have? The answer to the question is 3. So let's move on. Okay, how much of the pie do we have? Well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of the pie out of how many? Well, I already know I had 5, 6, 7, 8. 5 out of 8. 5 is answering my question. How many pieces do we have? 5. So that is my numerator. And then the 8 is my denominator. It tells me how many did I have in all. Denominator. All right, hopefully this is review and you're Mrs. Day, I'm so bored by now. Now, here's something a little bit different. How much pizza do we have? Well, if I take a look at this, I'm like, holy smokes, Miss Day, I have the whole thing. Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I do have all 8 colored in. Now, how many pieces do we have? I have 8, so I have 8 out of 8. How many pieces do I have? The question is the numerator 8. How many pieces in all? 8. Well, if I take a look at this picture, I see all the pieces are shaded in. So I have all the pieces. So that means I have the whole thing. I have one pizza. Whenever you see a number over itself, you know that it equals 1 because I have all of the pieces. Okay, I want you to try this. Look at the shapes in 1 and 2, and I want you to write me a fraction that shows how much is shaded. So go ahead and pause the video and do that, and then start the video again when you're ready to get your answers. Okay, so if we look, the question is how many shaded? Well, that's my numerator. 3 out of how many total? 8. 3/8. This next shape, how much is shaded? That's my numerator answering that question. 1, how many parts total? 2. Now for this next one, my numerator asks how many parts shaded. Well, there's 3 parts shaded. How many total? 3. That means I have the whole thing shaded. It's one whole. Okay, now sometimes you're going to see that fractions are part of a set. Okay, it's not going to be a fraction bar. It's going to be part of a set. So right here, I've got a set of triangles. So if I were to ask you that same question, how many are shaded in this set, what would you say? Hopefully you would have said, well, the question is how many are shaded. And I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4 shaded. How many are there in the set altogether? Well, there's 6. So I answer this question the same way I would with fraction bars, 4/6. How about this set? How many shaded? Well, hopefully the answer to your question was 3, but how many are there all together? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. So 3 out of the 8 are shaded. We say 3/8. Okay, you try these. Okay, let's see what you got. If I look at this first set of stars, how much is shaded? There's 2 shaded. That answers my question. And then I want to know how many are in the total set. Well, there's 3. Now look at these fun emojis. So how many are shaded? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are shaded. How many are there total? 8. How about this last one right here, this set of ovals? Question is, how many are shaded? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are shaded. How many are in the entire set? 10, which means 10 over 10 means I have them all. I have the whole thing. Now this one right here, you may not know how many boys in our class. Well, I'll tell you, there's 24 kids in our class, and we have exactly the same number of boys as we do girls. Perfectly split right down the middle. So if you figure that out, hopefully you got, well, what's our numerator? It answers this question right here. What part of our class is boys? So we're going to put 12. How many are in our class? 24. So 12 out of our 24 boys, or 12 of our classmates are boys. Okay, now we're going to work on drawing a model to represent fractions. Now, whenever you see this word model, you're going to typically draw those fraction bars or those pie charts. So for this one, I know that my denominator is telling me that I am going to have 3 parts to my model. So I'm going to draw a fraction bar with at least 3, or with exactly 3 parts, but I need to try to get them as close to the same size as possible. Now, how many pieces am I going to shade in? That answers my question. So it's my numerator. So I'm going to shade 1, 2. Okay, now let's do this 5, 6 together. So if I'm looking at this, first thing I'm going to ask myself is how many pieces are in this model? Hopefully you said 6, because 6 is my denominator. So I am going to draw a model that has 6 pieces. So you draw that model as well. Okay, now that you've got your model drawn, you need to ask yourself, how many pieces do I shade? Well, 5 answers that question, so I'm going to shade 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I now have 5 out of 6 pieces shaded. Okay, let's have you do some. So I want you can ignore this. This was just my little note for teaching in class. But there's 3 fractions here, 3/4, 1/2, and 5/6. I want you to pause your video and draw models for each of these. And then restart your video when you're ready to check your answers. Okay. So hopefully on this first one you drew something that had 4 equal shapes, because that's what my denominator tells me. My numerator tells me how many to shade in. 1, 2, and 3. If I look at 1/2, the denominator tells me how many pieces. Whoops, my thing skipped. And my numerator answers my question of how many are shaded. And there's just 1. Okay, for our final one, number 3, they're the same thing. Now I know you all know right away that this equals 1, but you still have to show me how many pieces. So don't just draw one great big thing and shade it in. So I'm going to draw, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's how many pieces I have. My numerator tells me how many pieces are shaded in, and there's 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I have all 5 pieces shaded. So I have shaded the whole thing. I've shaded one hole. Okay, now I want you to draw a set to represent the fraction. Now when we talk about set, remember we talk about those little shapes. You can choose anything that you want. So let's say I am going to do suns. So how many suns do I need? I need 8. So 1, these are horrible suns, but that's okay, you get the drift. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's put my rays on them. I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit harder to do on my notepad. Man, these just look like a bunch of germs instead of a bunch of beautiful sun rays. Okay, so how many do I need to shade in? How many suns? So that is my numerator, which answers the question. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I have 5 suns shaded out of 8 total. Okay, now I want you to draw a fraction using some sort of set for 2/3, 1/8, and 7/7. So go ahead and pause your video and draw those. Okay, I'm going to make mine a little bit easier this time. I'm going to do triangles for my 2/3. So I know that I have to have 3 triangles. How many of those triangles in my numerator tells me to shade in 2. I have 2 out of the 3 shaded. How about 1/8? Well, how many pieces do I have? I have 8 pieces, and I'm just going to do circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it wants to know how many do I need to shade. Well, The answer is my numerator, and that says 1, so I'm just going to shade 1. Now, something else I want you to think about. I'm going to undo that. So, shading one of the 8 circles. Folks, it doesn't matter where that circle is shaded. I could color in this one almost smack in the middle, but I still have just one of the 8 shaded. So, kind of keep that in mind. It always doesn't have to be perfectly in order, and you will see it given to you that way as well. Okay, 7/7. So for this one, I am going to draw squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many squares do I have shaded in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I actually have all 7 shaded. Now this question down here, it says, what do you notice about the relationship between the numerator and the denominator and how much is shaded? So I want you to kind of take a look. What do you notice? Well, hopefully you're noticing that on these fractions right here, my numerators, they're all smaller than my denominators, okay? But now down here, they're the exact same. So my numerator in these particular fractions, they are less than or equal to my denominator. Just kind of a little something to keep in your head. Okay, the next one, shade the model to represent the fraction 1/4. Well, 1/4 is my numerator, and it tells me to shade just 1. And then the denominator is how many boxes. Down here, if I've got 1/3, so I'm going to color away, and then I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This one, it's not divided into 3, is it? What am I going to do here? Well, let me undo this because they're going to have to think about this, okay? So our denominator is telling me I should only have 3 parts. But when I look at the shape that's given to me, there's 6. So here's a way that we can handle this, because what's happened here is they have taken a model that has 3 parts and they've cut it in half. So now that I have 6 parts, and believe it or not, these are still going to be equal. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to count to 3. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now my numerator says I have to have 1/3 colored in, correct? Well, if I look at the top one, I need to color in the 1, and here the 1. So now I have 1/3 colored in. Now let's come back over here to this model. I'm going to redraw it. If I were to have that same shape, the way I had it divided before, and I were to color in the 1/3 on this shape, take a look at that. So if you look, my shapes are the same. It's just this one kind of got divided in half. But if I look, I can almost take this one right here, put it on top of that one, and it's going to match up. I have the same amount shaded. It's just up here, it's really divided into 6 pieces. How many did I end up coloring? I colored 2. And believe it or not, 2/3 is the exact same, or 2/6, I'm sorry, is the exact same thing as 1/3. Okay, let's try this one together. I have to color in 3/4. Well, my denominator tells me there should only be 4 pieces. So I'm going to count out by 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. My numerator tells me how many need to be colored, and it says 3. So out of every 4, I have to color 3. So out of the top 4, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. And out of the bottom 4, 1, 2, 3. I've now colored 3/4 in. Now just kind of a little thing here, if I wanted to write this a different way, I could totally say I colored in 6 out of 8. because overall there were 8 pieces and I colored in 6. So that also tells me 6/8 is the exact same thing as 3/4. And we're going to get into that later in the week. Okay, you try this one. Color in 1/4. Okay, hopefully you're numbering 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry about this. See this down here? This is my dog trying to put his head on my screen. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, my numerator tells me how many to shade out of every 4. Well, I have to shade 1 out of each 4. So there's 1 out of my first 4, 1 out of my second 4, and 1 out of my third 4. So now I have shaded in 1/4 of the shape. Well, there's actually 12 pieces. How many did I shade in? I shaded in 3. So that tells me that 1/4 is the same as 3/12. And once again, if I were to draw this as fourths and just shaded in 1/4, I shaded the same amount in this one as I did this one. Okay. Alrighty, folks. Oops. So I accidentally hit the pause button. I'm not quite sure how I did that, but if you didn't hear it, you have homework. It is a slideshow in our e-learning classroom. That one is going to have you draw shapes, and it's going to have you draw models. So when you go to do the models, you can go to Insert Table and make your model that way, and then you can just click in each little square and shade it with the paint bucket. Or you can insert shapes for your sets. So just do whatever works for you, but please do it all on that slideshow so that I can see your work. And then don't forget your Spire Review and your DMR. That is a slideshow as well. We will go over all of these in class tomorrow morning. See you later and have a great day.